Joining us now is Dr. Eric Loeb. He is an expert on Middle East studies at FIU. He lived over in Iran for a number of years, so you heard what Pentagon officials say. They say this attack last night was intended to kill Americans. Do you buy that, and do you believe we've seen the last of retaliation from Iran?
I absolutely do not buy it. We saw just a few months ago in September that the Iranians conducted a very sophisticated, high-precision strike on Saudi airfields, oil fields, excuse me, and refineries. And so I believe that the Iranians had the capacity to conduct another sophisticated, high-precision strike against these U.S. bases in Iraq, chose not to do so. They wanted to save face. They wanted to show that they've responded, but they didn't want to surpass the red line of killing Americans, taking American casualties, and risking a direct confrontation with Iran.
So if that's true, it sounds like they may be willing to come to the negotiating table, but as you heard Natalie Brand report, the president talked about increasing economic sanctions. Is that likely to help or hurt that effort?
Of course, this is going to escalate tensions because the Iranians haven't necessarily differentiated between military warfare and economic warfare. Since the Trump administration withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal in May 2018, they have renewed and even intensified sanctions against Iran. And Iran's condition is, if they were, they've on their side, they've withdrawn their commitments from the Iran nuclear deal just recently on Sunday, even further. And their condition is that once the U.S. withdraws sanctions, then they would come back to a deal. So it would have to be conditional on that. And now they're even talking about the U.S. withdrawing from the region and minimizing its military footprint there in countries like Iraq and elsewhere.
So we've heard the FBI talking about, and also Homeland Security talking about, the possibility of cyber attacks emanating from Iran. Do they have that kind of capability, and might they have other people help them in such an effort?
Their cyber capabilities are inferior to those of Russia and China, but nonetheless they are robust and they are potent. They have been used repeatedly. And these are the kind of attacks that go on and don't necessarily are not necessarily high profile. They could cause a lot of damage to electricity, to finance, to other sectors of our economy and society, but they don't necessarily put our leadership on the spot as much as the kind of high profile attacks we've seen with missiles being launched against American bases, the attack on the U.S. Embassy, that would necessarily compel our leaders to have to respond here in the United States in as much of a forceful way. It's much more of a covert type of activity.
You heard in that soundbite the president talked about getting other countries involved in this, invoking NATO. Does he have the political currency to make that happen?
I would say no. He has, I mean, first of all, the withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal in May 2018, and we've withdrawn from other, since President Trump has been in power, other multilateral agreements. This was an agreement that took years of painstaking negotiations with the Europeans, our traditional allies, with Russia and the Chinese. We've unilaterally withdrawn from that agreement. We've also disparaged NATO as an organization, making comments and statements that we've been carrying disproportionately the load of that organization. And so now a lot of analysts and commentators and scholars are scratching their heads saying that now the administration wants to pursue a multilateral route when all along it's been going unilaterally, escalating tensions against the wishes of our allies.
Yeah. It's one thing to go after a known terrorist like Osama bin Laden. This is a little bit different when you go after a top government official. Does this open up a Pandora's box?
Absolutely. We assassinated, although we're using the term terrorist, the fact is that we have assassinated a senior military and even political figure in Iran. And as we could see from the morning ceremonies earlier this week and the show of public outcry and support for this gentleman, that he was a very important and popular figure in Iran. Now, his interests didn't always align with the U.S., but at times they did. And one of the reasons why he is a national hero in Iran is that he led the campaign to defeat ISIS in Iraq and Syria. My concern is that, as you said, opening a Pandora's box, surpassing the red lines, using drones now to target not just non-state terrorist actors, but actually senior government officials. We had the monopoly once on drones. We no longer do. The question is now, is it going to be open season on other senior military and political officials, including our own? It sets a very dangerous precedent in the international arena.
Well, Dr. Loeb, thank you so much for giving us some perspective on this very important issue. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here. And